الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على الصراط المستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا في الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا آثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إن إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردن الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني ذل في ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمر وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ من النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أن حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاع إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أن نطعم من لو يشاء الله وطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ بالصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواج في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتاز اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره نكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر ما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أن خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع مشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرد الإنسان أن خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون اللهم إنا نستحفظك ونستودعك أدياننا وأبداننا وأنفسنا وأهلنا وأولادنا ومالنا وكل شيء أعطيتنا اللهم اجعلنا وإياهم في كنفك وأمانك وعيادك من كل شيطان وبرير وجبار عنيد وذي بغي وذي حسر من شر كل ذي شر إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم جملنا بالعافية والسلامة وحققنا بالتقوى والاستقامة وعذنا من موجبات الندام إنك سميع الدعاء اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وأولادنا ومشايخنا وإخواننا في الدين وأصحابنا ونحبنا في كل من أحسنين والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات يا رب العالمين وصل اللهم على عبدك رسولك سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وارزقنا كمال متابعتي له ظاهرا وباطنا في عافية وسلامنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ما شاء الله تبارك الله. So just a quick reminder. So do you know which one it is here, Habib? There's 2 marks here. This one? Okay. Just a quick reminder of one of the etiquettes of this Jalsat al-Awwabin. The primary intention that we should make is to open up our hearts to absorb the meanings that Imam Abdullah bin al-Haddad is presenting to us. And these are books that require that not only hearing this knowledge, but a conscious intention to put the knowledge into practice. So we want to have a strong intention to that hear the knowledge, but also to put that knowledge into practice. And that we should always remind ourselves of the nature of this type of knowledge. That the Adawi used to say about the special nature of the books of Imam al-Ghazali and Imam al-Sha'rani and Imam al-Haddad is that Imam al-Ghazali ghazal al-Sharia, is that he spun the Sharia. And what that means is that if you imagine, for instance, cotton, that in order for you really to benefit from cotton that's being grown in the field, you can't just pluck it from the plant and then just weave some type of garment. Right? There's a process that you have to harvest the cotton. And the first thing you have to do is to turn the cotton into thread. So Imam al-Ghazali, it's as if that through his scholarly contributions that he took that cotton, which is of less use on the plant, harvested it, and that he turned it and spun it into thread, which is easier to use. And then what Imam al-Sha'rani did in the common thread in all of them is that they're joining between the outward and the inward. That he took the thread and he turned it into fabric. So Imam al-Sha'rani nasajaha. It's as if he wove the Sharia. And then Imam al-Haddad is that he qassaraha wa hadaha, is that he, if you will, that turned that fabric into a ready-made garment. In other words, his books are not only the essence of the Sharia, they're the essence of the revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's right around these days today, in fact, that I was looking at some of the statements of Shaykh Al-Idrus about the Ihya Ulumuddin and what he saw in it. And it's very detailed, but very briefly, one of the things that he says is that he says the Ihya is a tafsir of the Quran and the Sunnah. As sharh. So it is a commentary and it's an explanation or an explication of the Quran and the Sunnah. And what he really meant by that is that the most important underlying aims of the Quran, insofar as it relates to certain types of knowledge and actions, as that Imam Ghazali expounded upon that, because that all the three most important sciences that we all learn are the sciences that comprise the individual obligations, the basic belief, the basic practice, and then the heart. And so that what he viewed in the Ihya Ulumuddin was that the essential message of the Quran was being explained by the Ihya Ulumuddin. And in other words, is that he facilitated it for us, is that this is the essence of what the Quran was sent for. And so what he actually, that starts his book, one of the first things he says in the Jawahir al-Quran, is he says that the whole purpose of the Quran ultimately is that it's an invitation by the Lord of the worlds to his creation, so that they can come to know him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so all of that being said, in this idea of the Ihya Ulumuddin and then the other books of Imam al-Ghazali that are either abridgments of the Ihya Ulumuddin or also a part of his project of tajdeed, of renewal, specifically related to the ilm tariq al-akhirah, the science of the path of the hereafter, is that it also relates to this idea of ilm and amal, what we need to know, what we need to practice, which essentially is what taqwa is. And so all of these concepts are interrelated, and that the beauty of Imam al-Haddad's books is that he takes the essence of if the books of Imam al-Ghazali, or the essential meanings that we need to know from the Quran and the Sunnah, is that the essential meanings from the Ihya are summarized in the books of Imam al-Haddad. So they're the quintessence of the quintessence, the essence of the essence. And it is for this reason that these books are the zubda, that they are the core, they're the heart, and that of what really needs to be learned from this religion. And that's why they're so important, why they have to be read time and time again. And this particular book that I'm going to start reading from, the Nasaih al-Diniyah, is that they say it's the ha of the ihya. So that if you spell ihya, alif, ha, ya, alif, hamza, is that the ha, meaning that the essence of the ihya is laid out in this book here, Nasaih al-Diniyah, translated by Dr. Mustafa al-Badwi as Counsels of Religion. Anyhow, so we left off on page 27, where he says, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَنْهُ وَنَفَعَنَا بِهِ. Feel the imminence of death, for it is, quote, the nearest hidden thing lying in wait. A human being does not know. It may be that only very little of his lifetime remains, yet he is attending to this world and forgetful of the hereafter. Should he die in this state, he will return to God unprepared to meet him. He might then wish to be reprieved, but will never be granted that. As he says, exalted is he, until when death comes to one of them, he says, my Lord, send me back, that I may do the good works I had left undone. It is but a word he speaks, and behind them is a barrier till the day they will be resurrected. Only a fool who is prey to illusion harbors long hopes, procrastinates and neglects preparing for death. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, he is sagacious who brings his soul to reckoning and works for what comes after death, and he is inadequate who follows his passions and harbors illusory hopes in God. Long hopes are but part of following the passions of one's soul and being deceived by its false hopes. One of the virtuous predecessors, may God be pleased with him, has said, were you to witness the end and how it approaches, you would detest hope and its deceptions. Another said, how many a man began his day but never ended it, or hoped in a morrow he never saw. Yet another said, a man may be laughing heartily, yet his shroud has already left the bleacher's shop. A hadith says, the first among this nation will succeed by detachment and certainty, while the last will perish through greed and long hopes. This is a hadith in Al-Bayhaqi, and which is also a hadith of the indication of the preeminence of the companions, the reasons for the preeminence of the companions. Yes, that they had knowledge, but they had true knowledge. And many of the details of knowledge that was formulated later, the companions themselves, many of them at least, that did not have. But what did our Prophet ﷺ say is that they will succeed. What was their success? What was the source of their success? Two things: detachment and certainty. Detachment and certainty. That's something that the companions had to a degree that they surpassed everyone that came after them. In other words, detachment is that they had an ability to prefer the next world over this world. They weren't tied to the dunya. And there was relative degrees of that amongst them, but even the least of them and none of them that were of that small rank is that they were detached. And then they had certainty. And how could you have anything other than certainty when you met the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? You can imagine meeting Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the certainty that you would have had, that having seen the radiant presence of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the realities of certainty that are all taken from him during his lifetime sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and after his passing. And that this is why one of them referred to the Prophet as the Majma' al-Haqa'iq al-Imaniyah. He is the gathering point for all of the realities of faith. In other words, is that he is their source, and it is from him that these meanings are taken. And so when the companions were in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, is that his light was so strong, ﷺ, is that it pierced the depth of their being. And it gave birth to certainty in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And this is why that it was such a powerful encounter for those who believed in the Prophet ﷺ, which is also simultaneously a proof of Allah's existence. The people could see him and not see Him. And from this perspective, one of the greatest proofs of Allah is the existence of atheists. The fact that it can be so clear, yet so many people are blind. The fact that you could actually see the Messenger of Allah and not see the Messenger of Allah is a clear proof that Allah exists. Is that He is the one who gives and He is the one who takes, and He is the one who that opens for some people and He is the one who restricts others. Tabaraka wa ta'ala. And so that these are the two traits that allowed the companions that surpassed those who came after them. Whereas the last, that will perish through greed and long hopes. And just thinking that we're going to live forever. And this is, even though we absolutely know that we're going to die, that there's something about, to the degree that we indulge in this world, that it creates this false sense, this illusory sense, that we're actually going to remain here for a long period of time. Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu said, "The thing I fear most for you is that you follow passions and have long hopes. As for following passions, it repels one from the truth. As for long hopes, they make one forget the hereafter." So in other words, is that too much following of the desire can stain someone's acceptance of truth. He who forgets the hereafter does not work for it, and he who does not work for it reaches it bankrupt of good works. And there's neither salvation nor gain in the hereafter without them. Should he seek to be returned to this world, at that time to do these good works, he will be prevented from doing so. Then his remorse and sorrow will be immense at a time when remorse will avail nothing. When the Messenger of God ﷺ counseled Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, "Be in this world as if you were a stranger or a passerby." It's a hadith in Bukhari. Just imagine if we implemented that hadith. And then when people thought that we were strange, is that we would actually be prepared for their thinking we're strange, because we already viewed ourselves in the world as strangers. And be in this world as if you were a stranger or a passerby, someone that's just passing by, that they're not going to cultivate the world, right? They're just going through, they're going to take what they need and do what needs to be done, and then they move on. And this is powerful exhortation indeed to shorten one's hopes and curb one's desires for this world, one's desire for this world. Ibn Umar used to say, when you wake up in the morning, do not expect the evening. When your evening comes, do not expect morning. And take from your life for your death, and from your good health for your sickness. Know that as concerns hope, people may be divided into 3 categories. That's a little bit long, so we'll stop there, inshallah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi sallam. The complete summons and general reminder. Chapter 1 on counseling, reminding, threatening, and warning the first kind of people who are the scholars of religion. Where he says, "Know that scholars are the leaders of the people and the most eminent of persons among them. They are like salt in relation to food, for food is good when the salt in it is good, and spoiled when the salt is spoiled. This is why it has been said, O reciters, O salt of the town, how can salt ever retrieve its goodness once it is spoiled?" The reciters are the scholars. This is how they were called in the early years, for the carriers of the Qur'an were those who possessed the knowledge of the religion of God, His injunctions, the rulings, for they not only memorized the Qur'an, but also studied it in depth, were familiar with its orders and prohibitions, exhortations and rebukes, and the limits it sets. This is why those who memorized the whole Qur'an among the companions were few, so that by the time the Prophet ﷺ passed away, and the number of his companions had runs into tens of thousands, yet those of them who had memorized the Qur'an in full were few. Some said 4, others 7. Those who memorized Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Ali Imran were considered among their most knowledgeable. A hadith says, "He who memorizes the whole Quran has contained prophethood between his two flanks, except that he does not receive revelation." The Quran is a tremendous revelation from a tremendous Lord to a noble messenger, wherein he has gathered the knowledge of the ancients and the latecomers, the news of the earliest generations and those who followed them. As he said, may God's blessing and peace be upon him. In it are news of those who are before you and those who will come after you, and also appraisal of what is happening among you. He who speaks it speaks the truth, and he who rules according to it rules justly. But he who seeks guidance elsewhere is sent astray by God.
So he's this is the first category, and this is about advice now towards the ulama, and this is one of the greatest tribulations of the ummah in the present day, is the brain drain that is taking place in the Muslim world, where oftentimes the most intelligent of our people, the Muslims, are going to study that other than religious topics. And there's not a problem in adding to that a study of the religion, a study of other things. But when the least intelligent of people go into a study of the Sharia, then what else are you going to expect? There's no possible way for the ummah to get out of this predicament until we put things in their proper place. Is that the most important knowledge, the foundational knowledge, is the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah and the other sciences of the deen. And it is from that perspective that we should view all other knowledge. And as long as we have this bifurcation of knowledge, where that we have that large number of people studying in great detail that Western knowledge that is highly charged in and of itself and containing a long list of underlying assumptions, many of which are contravene the essence of this deen, is that we will remain in the position that we're in, and there will always be this suspicion of the people of knowledge, and that they will be seen oftentimes as backwards and in need of that reform and so forth and so on. And there's going to be no good from anyone's thought or anyone's experiment or endeavor or whatever it is that they're doing if it's not rooted in sound knowledge, that at very least that does not contravene the Quran and the Sunnah. And ideally that it's encouraged and supported, even if by way of that foundation. And so as long as this is the case, we are climbing uphill and just trying to minimize the harm of the situation. And much of the energy that we have to spend, even for instance in establishing an institution like the one we have here, is convincing people that this is actually something that they should invest in, or something that they should actually spend their money on and support. And the vast majority of people, were you to do other types of projects, people would hasten very quickly to support them. But when you explain to people that you want to build a traditional institution that is rooting people in the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah and the Islamic disciplines, a good percentage of people, it's just simply not their interests. And that you have to go out of your way to explain to them how this is actually going to help people and so forth. And especially if you tell them that there's not going to be a piece of paper that is some type of degree at the end in the way that it's normally given in other programs, is it even more so that people will wonder about that. And this is the state we're in. And that having said that alhamdulillah, we keep moving forward and we do what it is that we need to do, and that we have to be firm when it comes to these things, and to know without doubt is that anyone who frames the conversation like that ultimately is bereft of the most important perspective of all, which is to understand is that the most important knowledge of all is a knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah, and that the perspective that comes from the Book of Allah and the words of the Messenger ﷺ should form the way that we view everything around us. And unfortunately is that we are following that other people of other religions down the lizard hole in our compartmentalized approach to religion, where we think that, okay, a good portion of my life, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to get by. And I'm going to pray a little bit on the side and maybe attend Jummah and so forth. And that while that's still something that's good, is that this is something that is affecting us greatly. And part of the reason is that we do not have a large number of scholars who can clarify these realities to us and to teach our deen in light of much of what is out there by way of knowledge in the modern world, and to give us the perspectives that we need to ground our community in knowledge. And so it is, whereas in the early period, is that the people of Quran were the people of knowledge. And the scholars were the ones that knew the most Quran. And what they meant by memorization of Quran was not just memorizing the Quran itself. It was knowing the meanings of the Book of Allah. And not just knowing the meanings of the Book of Allah, it was putting those meanings into practice, such that they were people of a strong spiritual state from the light of the Quran and from the blessing of putting knowledge into practice. And this is for this reason, even though we're thousands upon thousands of companions, that very few actually memorize the entire Quran. He mentioned two positions here. Some of them say that there's many more than even 4 or many 7. There's a lot of difference of opinion about that. Nevertheless, the entire Quran was written down during the lifetime of our Prophet ﷺ and compiled during the lifetime of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq after the passing of the Rasul ﷺ. Anyhow, is that what we this is why one of the greatest things that you can do, and even if you don't understand Arabic, is to read a translation of the meanings. If you feel like your passions are getting the best of you, read the Quran, even if it's a page. And there's something that happens when you read the Book of Allah. It recalibrates you, and it puts your desires in check. And you just realize, even through reading the translation of the meanings, human beings simply don't talk like that. And I remember that early on in my Islam. It's like the first Ramadan that I didn't really read Arabic very well, so I did a khatam in English. I think I read the Yusuf Ali translation. And one of the things that comes clear from reading even the translation of the meanings, human beings don't speak like that. It's just it's the grandeur of the khitab, of the address, that comes across to a certain degree even in English. And it's one of the great ways that we can put ourselves in check and to curb the desires that might be overcoming us. Okay, let's just read one more paragraph.
It has now come to the point where people are reading the Quran from its opening to its conclusion without knowing what it is, why it was sent down, or to what events it refers. Moreover, they are unconcerned that they do not know, so that they are never motivated to learn because of their extreme distraction and the degree to which their hearts are diverted away from any attempt to understand the book of their Lord by being immersed in the pleasures of this world and deceived by its ornaments. Who can be more astray than he whose description and whose attitude this is? These are like cattle. In fact, they are even more astray, for those are the distracted. Now you know that the Quran is the origin and essence of all sciences, which it embraces and contains. God, exalted be He, said to His Prophet, may blessings and peace be upon him, we have sent down the book upon you with clear exposition of everything, guidance, mercy, and glad tidings for the Muslims. We have left nothing out from the book. Therefore, when you see a person reading the Quran,
MashaAllah.
The book Knowledge and Wisdom. The order of priorities. The arifun, or knowers of God, and scholars concentrate primarily on making their faith and certitude sound and strong, and on purifying their tawheed from the blemishes of hidden idolatry. They then turn their attention to perfecting the virtues such as detachment, sincerity, and keeping the breast clear toward Muslims, and to counteracting blameworthy attributes such as greed, ostentation, and vanity. Next, they attend to the soundness of their good outward actions and to guarding themselves against falling into evil works. Lastly, they attend to the good management of their daily lives and the preservation of their soundness by being scrupulous, accepting good counsel, maintaining frugality, and remaining content with little. Knowers are happy with the bare necessities and are willing to let others manage their worldly affairs for them, provided they are scrupulous and avoid injustice. Learn, then, understand.
MashaAllah. So he just gave us the list of priorities in terms of the arifin and the muhaqqiqeen. These are the true people of Allah who know Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their most important concern is to strengthen their iman and their yaqeen and their certainty, and to make sure that they have no ulterior motives whatsoever in everything that they do. And so that's their first goal of all. How can I strengthen my certainty and my yaqeen? And there's a number of ways of doing that. Imam al-Haddad told us about that in the Book of Assistance. But part of that is protecting it from what would blemish it, what would bring darkness to the heart. So that's part of it, is that warding off anything that tarnish the heart. And then that what would increase it are that doing things like recitation of the Quran with tadabbur, reflecting deeply upon it, that learning the hadith of our Prophet ﷺ, reflecting deeply upon them, that constant worship and being around people of certainty, people that have strong iman, and so forth and so on, and reflecting upon what's in the heavens and the earth. These 3 or 4 things are the foundations of strengthening our certainty. And a lot of the knowledge that we end up learning is knowledge that will bring about certainty, but in a slightly different way, more so in terms of what it wards off from us as opposed to it actually increasing it. The way that our certainty is increased is in the way that was mentioned. And that perhaps the greatest of all of those is that being in the presence of the people of certainty. Just as we mentioned in relation to the Prophet ﷺ, that when you're with the true inheritors of the Rasul, and that you have powerful experiences with them, is that your certainty increases. And certain things that you know are just simply not possible to explain scientifically. And oftentimes it's by way of a powerful dream that someone attains that certainty. Sometimes it's some type of awakened state vision. Sometimes it's hearing about that someone else's vision or some other experience that they're having. And that these types of things are very, very common when someone is in the presence of the righteous. And what that does is it gives us a whole new perspective on the material world that for so many people entraps. The material world that captures a lot of people and doesn't let them out, because I think that this is really what it's all about. But the odd thing is, even scientifically speaking, is that still to this day, we can't say that we know definitively what actually matter really is. We try to study it, we try to describe it and so forth, but definitively what actually is this matter just before my eyes? Is it there, is it not there? It looks like it's there, but when you that look a little bit deeper or study it or that try to figure out what it really is, there's more and more questions about that what actually is matter. And if that's the case, is that this world that we rely on so much, if anything, that it's more like a passing shadow or a dream that we wake up from. And it's really there to point to that its lack of permanence is to point to is that only our Lord Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He is the everlasting Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And so our number one concern should be strengthening our certainty. And then It should be in making sure is that all of our worship is totally sincere to Allah. Nothing blemishes our intentions that we make. We want to be absolutely sincere in everything that we do. And then we want to inculcate within ourselves these great virtues, ward off from ourselves the various diseases of the heart. And oftentimes that doesn't happen until you go a little bit deep into them, as we did last weekend, where we started to look at kibr, we started to look at ujub, and we started to look at the various causes of kibr, and that we start thinking about our own selves. Do we have any of these causes within ourselves? Have they led us to, in any circumstances, that to show arrogance towards anyone in the what way? Is it that a small amount or a large amount or somewhere in between, and so forth and so on? Until we actually spend the time doing that, oftentimes that we don't know that whether we are free from these diseases or not. And then after all of that, then someone focuses upon making sure that their outward acts are the way that they're supposed to be. And that, or you could say along with that, because this all kind of go together. Strengthening your certainty, adorning your heart with good character, warding off the vices, and performing your acts of worship well. This should be our priority. And especially for our community, is that this is what we ultimately what we want to do, is to have a series of gatherings of remembrance and of knowledge and of activities whereby which that we can actively, collectively take part in this process. And if we're all not increasing in certainty, and we're not increasing in virtue, and we're not increasing in correct performance of things outwardly, then we need to step back and to think about what are we doing wrong, such that there's things preventing us from achieving this, and that we need to try to find other ways to do this, and so forth. And there's quite a bit that we actually have to do, and oftentimes people have very little time to do it. We have a lot of preoccupations in the modern world, but to a certain degree there is enough time, but it does require a little bit of sacrifice, and we have to find ways to fit in throughout the week and throughout the month and on a quarterly and yearly basis everything that we need in order to do what Imam al-Haddad is calling us to. And then he says, after all of that, the Arifin, their concern after that is their livelihood. And this doesn't mean that we're not supposed to work. This is not downplaying the livelihood at all. But we have to have the correct perspective when it comes to our livelihood. And even if to pay the bills we have to work long hours, 6 or 7 days a week, what is our intention behind doing it? That have the correct intention behind what you do. And if we make the right intention, we get the reward for fulfilling an obligation every single moment we are at work or doing something that pertains to work. And so this is not to downplay the importance of livelihood. This is just saying is that the true realized folk is that that's their last concern. It doesn't mean that they don't work. Of course they work. That not all of them were completely outside of the means. Many of them had jobs of different sorts. They had crafts, or they had shops that they owned or something like that. But because their primary preoccupation was the aforementioned, is that Allah facilitated that for them for the most part. And that also they had these traits of heart where they sufficed themselves with little. So they didn't allow their greed to take over, which would cause them unnecessary that preoccupation with worldly things. So this is what he says is the priorities of the people of Allah. And then the opposite.
As for the unaware and the confused, they concentrate their attention mainly on their worldly affairs and their physical pleasures and appetites, such as food, clothes, marriage, amassing wealth, and so on. Then, when a few of them grow a little more aware and far-sighted, they begin to pay attention to the soundness of their outward actions, such as their devotional activities. They may then move on to attending on their inward attributes, and last of all, to the strengthening of their faith. This is the reverse of the order of priorities recognized by the people of direct knowledge and realization. Reflect and meditate on this, and you will find it clear, and God knows best.
MashaAllah. That's actually very prevalent in our community. People that just say, no, it's not time for me yet. I'm not ready to go to Hajj yet. I want to wait, until I'm, 75 years old, and that's subhanallah. And so that it can just be an atonement for all of my sins and that type of thing. It's one thing if you from Indonesia and there's like a 20-year waiting list because there's so many Indonesians that want to go to Hajj. But it's another thing that if someone has the ability to do it and they don't do it, and for that reason, thinking that that's a righteous thing to do, to wait and postpone for that particular reason, which it's not. It's better to get yourself together and to go ahead and go. And really the Shafi school is the only school that says that Hajj is an obligation bit-tarahi, and it's permissible that if you have the means to postpone it, and using as a proof the Prophet himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his lifetime. But the problem is in the Shafi school even is that if someone had the ability and then didn't go, that retrospectively that they're considered to be a fasiq, because if they died and they actually never went to Hajj, is that even though it was permissible for them to postpone it during their lifetime, that it's not a good state to actually die in. And that Hajj is something that we should all do bi-idhnillahi ta'ala if we have the ability to do so. And even though nowadays it is very costly for many people because of the prices involved in airfare and hotels and all of that, from another perspective is that this should be money that we spend that open-heartedly. If we can't do it, we simply can't do it. But we shouldn't deem it to be a lot from another perspective in terms of sacrifice. Just as the etiquette when it comes to zakat is that you should never ever that be like, I have to pay my zakat. Because that is only the stingiest of the stingy that have difficulty and a heaviness in paying zakat. And that's actually the very worst type of stinginess of all, is to not want to pay your zakat. And that when it comes to zakat, that should be like, absolutely. We should be the type of people that are willing to double or even triple the amount that needs to be paid for zakat, to make sure that it's paid, make sure that it gets in the right place. Habib Abdullah Muslim bin Tahir, that he was a person of Basira, and that it was unveiled to him that one time when he gave out his zakat al-fitr, which is the hadith that says is that your fasting is suspended between the heavens and the earth until you give your zakat al-fitr, and that the person he gave it to actually that was not zakat eligible, and that it was unveiled to him that his fasting was suspended between the heavens and the earth until he actually that gave it to someone who was deserving of it, and then that it ascended at that point. There's a reality too that these, whether we see these things or not, these are happening in the unseen. Is that our actions are ascending, and that we hope that they're accepted in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, we only have a few minutes, subhanAllah. Time flies, doesn't it? Even the sessions over the weekend, Ya Latif. It's like right when you get into the session, and there's like 15 minutes left or 20 minutes left. Yani, mashallah. Tayyib, bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad. This is the chapter on reflection. The result of this kind of reflection is that you come to love the fortunate, habituate yourself to emulating their behavior and taking on their qualities, and detest the wretched, and habituate yourself to avoiding their behavior and traits of character.
So who's that? That is reflecting upon the akhlaq and the a'mal, the character traits and the acts of the awliya of Allah, those beloved to Allah. By reflecting upon that time and time again, as Dr. Zafar just read, is that you'll come to love the su'ada, those that are felicitous, those that are special, and that there's something about love, once that love happens in the heart and once that attachment is there, is that it's much easier to actually live like they live and to do what it is that they do. Okay?
Were we to allow ourselves to pursue the various channels of reflection, we would have to forego the brevity which we intended. That which we have mentioned should suffice the man of reason. You should with each kind of reflection bring to mind these verses, hadiths and other narratives relating to it. We have given an example of this by quoting some of the verses related to each kind of reflection. Beware of reflecting on the essence of God and His attributes in the wish to understand their nature and how they exist. No one ever became enamored of this without falling into the abysses of negation or the traps of anthropomorphism, tasbih. The Messenger of God, may blessings and peace be upon him, he said, reflect on the signs of God and do not reflect on His essence, for you will never be able to give Him His due.
Right. So this is his last thing, is that we're not supposed to reflect upon the essence of Allah, because we can not know the essence of Allah. The only thing that we can know about the essence of Allah is that He exists. But the reality of the essence of Allah, it's impossible. We can't know that with our intellect. We can know that He exists. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that there La ilaha illallah, but that we can't know the essence of Allah, and nor can we know the essence of that His attributes. And if you start the other way around, we don't even understand that fully and completely the way that His attributes manifest here in this world. So His actions, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we can't know His actions, then how are we going to know the reality of the sifat, of His traits? How are we going to know the reality of His essence, subhanahu wa ta'ala? We know what it is that we need to know. And that's what we're told in the book of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And we believe it as it is supposed to be believed in. And then when we learn what we need to learn to put into practice, is that the greatest thing that we can attain is a knowledge that is super rational, that Allah Ta'ala gives to your heart. And that what exactly is that knowledge? All you can do is point to it. All you can do is say that it tastes sweet like honey, but if you've never tasted honey, you don't know what it actually is until you actually taste it. So you just point to it because of the numerous that awliya and the salihin that have been gifted this type of knowledge that Allah Ta'ala refers to in the Quran, that وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. And we taught him knowledge that from our presence. These are known as the ulum al-dunniyya, knowledge that come from the direct presence of Allah, that our job is to learn the basics of our deen, put them into practice, and then that little by little, that over a long period of time, from the blessing of Allah Ta'ala, He gifts that righteous servants this knowledge. And so this is why that we're supposed to reflect upon the signs of Allah, reflect upon the blessings of Allah, reflect upon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, and as opposed to His essence, tabaraka wa ta'ala. And one of the basic principles of Tawheed is كُلُّ مَا خَطَرَ بِبَالِكَ فَاللَّهُ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ. Everything that comes to your mind, Allah is other than that. Anything that you could possibly imagine, any color you can possibly imagine, anything that you can possibly imagine, anything that you can possibly imagine with your mind, that is not Allah. That is not Allah. You can't imagine Allah in your mind. All you can do with your mind is to come to the knowledge that He exists. He's always existed. He always will exist. He's absolutely different from His creation. He's one in His essence, attributes, and actions, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's absolutely independent. And then you list all of the other attributes that we know with absolute certainty that we ascribe to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And then we strive outwardly to reach a state where Allah Ta'ala gives us the knowledge of the heart. And this is why it is the way of the Sada Ba'alawi, is they actually don't even study too many aqidah texts in detail. Because that their understanding is that, okay, you learn the basics, And the focus after that is on putting that knowledge into practice. And then you will come to know Allah. Although we fully respect the other scholarly methodologies that actually do study that in depth the text of Aqeedah, and it definitely has its place. But it's important to understand that its place primarily, when we talk about ilm al-kalam, is to ward off doubtful matters for people that have problems with them. But what these great scholars usually say is that people that have those issues, that complicated discussions and refutations don't tend to really solve their problems anyway. So it's something that has to be done, and it's there. And that there's no doubt that the contribution of our ulama in ilm al-kalam is amazing. And it's unparalleled in human history, that what we've been able to do throughout the centuries. And the books that are still there, starting at a very early period, extending into the present time. And it's an amazing legacy that still must be preserved. But for the vast majority of people, it's enough for them to study the basics and then focus on what is most important. And one of the things that Imam Razi asked for, as well as Imam Juwayni towards the end of their lives, was iman like the iman of the ajais. Is it to have faith like the faith of elderly woman? Meaning faith that is built upon absolute certainty and submission. We believe in things as they're supposed to be believed in. Khalas. And that was also the faith of the companions. They believed in the Book of Allah. They knew what the meanings of the verses meant, and they left it at that. And so, alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq and bless us in all of our different affairs, and to open up our hearts to every good. May Allah Ta'ala ward off tribulations from us, and bless us with strong yaqeen and strong iman, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. From the blessing of just reading these books and loving these great awliya and the salihin. May Allah Ta'ala, that what He blessed them with, bless us a portion of what He blessed them with, inshaAllah Ta'ala, and bless us to be from those that are counted amongst their followers, and amongst those that love them, and amongst those that they will intercede for on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Fi khayrin wa fa'afiyah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So inshaAllah Ta'ala, we will just end with, for time's sake, the recitation of the Fatiha, last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayat Al-Kursi, first verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayat Al-Kursi, and the last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and Khalas, Ma'awidatayn. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتب رسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق من شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد من شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس الفاتحة بسم الله.